Alright people, stop right there. This episode was specifically made to be part of a sizable Halloween collaboration with a bunch of other YouTubers. It was organized by Messiah, the one and only from the Messiahs and Mythology channel, so please head over there so that you can see this video as it was intended to be viewed. There'll be a link in the description, maybe even in the pinned comment to make it more accessible. This version of my channel exists only so that the playlist of monsters dissected is complete. Watching it here is illegal, so shoo. Here's an awkward transition to scare you away. Hello there, I'll be your guide for the next creature presented in this abhorrent list of abominations from around the world. However, the terrible thing I am going to show you is not a blasphemous beast, ghoulish ghost, vile vampire, or ominous ogre. This heinous horror is the baleful byproduct of botany. Alright, I'll stop with that now. So indeed, the being I brought for this occasion is but a piece of vegetation. However, it is not a boring ordinary plant or a shrub with magical properties. What I am about to describe here is a vicious being sustained by the blood of its victims. This plant is the Ya-Te-Veo, which I'm told translates to I see you, now I see you, or I already see you in Spanish. A menacingly odd name for a plant. It is said to live in Central and South America, as well as Central Africa and certain regions by the Indian Ocean. That's quite a range. But let's discuss that a bit later. You still do not know what it looks like after all. Well, the only thing you'd spot at first would be its trunk. A short and thick trunk from which tendril-like branches sprout. These stems hang down, lying on the ground near the plant, concealed by the undergrowth. The tentacle-like appendages are edged with sharp teeth or thorns, and wait in ambush for any prey that might approach it. Once an animal sets foot within range of the branches, they come alive, grabbing the unfortunate victim. The constricting tendrils then drag the prey towards the trunk, the barbs of which pierce the flesh, draining every last drop of blood. Once the carcass is dry, it is simply let go, left there to rot. Perhaps even attract more food. Some say it has a single eye it uses to locate the prey, but the most reliable sources do not mention such a feature, so make of that what you will. All in all, not a very plant-like being, more of a Lovecraftian horror. But where do these legends originate from? Well, the first notable mention of it was published in 1887, but some parts of the myth seem to be older than that. The exact details are hazy, so let me recount what we know. The primary accounts come from travelers of an era when the exploration of the remotest places of our planet was in full swing, each person coming back with a story more incredible than the last. Quite a few of these reports were recorded by James W. Buell in his 1887 book titled Sea and Land. It is a semi-scientific tome filled with both fact and fiction. Naturally, the Ya-Te-Veo falls into the latter category, mostly. In this book, it is suggested that a significant part of the legends did indeed originate from people living in the areas mentioned. The name was apparently given to it by Spanish-speaking inhabitants of Central America. However, for what reason would this name be used by natives in Central Africa or around the Indian Ocean? That's anyone's guess. The most likely explanation is confusion. From the 17th to the 20th century, tales of wondrous carnivorous trees, strangling vines, and other deadly plants appeared from time to time. This has led to a couple of these influencing each other, often getting mixed up. For the Ya-Te-Veo, the man-eating tree of Madagascar was one such vegetable. To briefly summarize this particular gourmet of humans, it was a hoax published by the New York World on the 26th of April 1874. Written by Edmund Spencer. Therefore, it wasn't ever believed to be a real thing, unlike our Ya-Te-Veo. However, it did gain much publicity, and obscured part of the quote-unquote real legend. What really annoys me is that the man-eating tree of Madagascar isn't even a proper tree. They could have given any name and description to their fake plant, and they chose to combine two that do not match. Shows you how much thought is generally behind hoaxes. But I digress. Buell or his sources might have been unknowingly or knowingly influenced by the publication, which is a good enough explanation to why such a peculiar plant would appear in Africa too. Looking at the image provided in the book, the attire and complexion of the people heavily suggests Africa, despite the Ya-Te-Veo's much stronger connection to the Americas. Nonetheless, this is what we have to work with. Let's circle back to its name. I already see you. If you've been paying attention, you'd say it got its name from the one eye it may or may not have. you would be completely and utterly wrong, shame on you. No, this name actually derives from a sound it makes. When the plant is agitated or moves its tendrils to envelop its prey, it does so with its barbs rasping on each other. This generates a hissing noise which resembles the Spanish term as affirmed by supposed witnesses. A chilling thing to hear right before one's bloodletting.
Ya-Te-Veo.
However, there is an account that claims that tentacles are not waiting for an ambush. Instead, they constantly flail around, striking at the air like the heads of a hydra having an argument. Although this seems to be quite the illogical addition. Naturally, there is no blood-sucking plant in America, but even if there was, it would be quite bad at its job if it was constantly in upheaval. First, that's tiring movement, burning a lot of energy. Second, save for a mentally challenged half-blind animal with hearing problems and arthritis, not many would move close enough to facilitate the vampiric feeding. Let's disregard this account as it cannot be true even in the fictional scenario where the plant is real. Another of Bill's sources, on the other hand, has an interesting claim. According to them, a single poisonous spike puncturing one's skin is enough to cause death. These rasping teeth are venomous and cause rapidly growing ulcers in an instant. Even if the victim miraculously escapes the clutches of the prehensile stems, the affliction is sure to take them afterwards. There are a few accounts originating from Africa as well. One tells us of Fen country. Yeah, I have no idea either where it is, but it is, or more likely was, a Central African place, if it ever existed in the first place. Regardless, here criminals and those accused of witchcraft are punished in a rather peculiar way. They are fed alive to a Ya-Te-Veo. Bad way to go, or at least it would be. As I have very subtly alluded to this a few times, there is no such thing as a vampiric tree, and the tales and reports have all been varying degrees of taking the piss or genuine belief in the impossible. While the idea is far-fetched, there is a modicum of truth to it. Vervice Mirabilis. A weird-looking but harmless plant. It was discovered around the same time as the man-eating trees gained popularity, therefore it might have fooled even seasoned naturalists from a distance. It has a short trunk and two rather broad leaves which continue to grow throughout its life and split into strips over time. It is not hard to imagine some falling for the tales of local natives looking at it. However, this only accounts for the African version, as it grows in Namibia, which is not even Central Africa. Truth be told, this is still the only viable candidate which at least vaguely covers the features of the Ya-Te-Veo. We have to attribute this creature to almost purely the human imagination, without a significant threat tethering it to reality. No known plant would come even close to resembling this leafless horror. But that's where I come in. Given that you are watching this video, chances are you are not familiar with my specialty, crafting realistic creatures from fantastical ones. While the Ya-Te-Veo might seem like a hard nut to crack, it's not even close to the most difficult thing I had to mimic. There are two distinct ways we can go about this, only one of which is correct. Let's try keeping it a plant first. There are glaring issues with this approach already. Movement, the eye, no leaves, and drinking only blood. Can they be solved though? Let's see. We can remove the eye, as that is not a consistent feature. Leaves are not a must-have either if the tendrils are sufficiently modified. Cacti photosynthesize using their stems, and their leaves are modified into spines, which we could reliably see as the teeth of the Ya-Te-Veo. Could this blood-drinking plant pass as a cactus? Not really. First off, cacti tend to be rather stiff, which is quite detrimental to moving tentacles. However, even if we have this particular species evolve past the stiffness, regaining the flexibility of certain herbaceous plants, we still have to tackle the issue of a cactus drinking blood. Glossing over the mechanical difficulties, there are no carnivorous cacti. Does that mean there could never be one? Actually, it's not as impossible as you think. Certain carnivorous plants can be found in pretty arid environments. The Portuguese sundew, which is not an actual sundew, is a perfect example. The reason this is not an unlikely scenario is because plants catch animals to combat an issue that is also prevalent in deserts: a lack of nutrients, usually nitrogen, which is a rather limiting factor for any plant. This can be offset by their specific type of predation. Since the exact habitat of the Ya-Te-Veo is not mentioned, we are on the right track. Blood does contain nitrogen, although consuming the whole body would be a more sensible thing. we could still infer that the reports are mistaken and the plant actually digests the whole body, slowly, arms wrapped around it. The blood sucking could simply be an embellishment resulting from the copious amount of bodily fluids lost as a result of the puncturing spines. Surprisingly smooth of a transition so far from legend to reality, but there is one fatal flaw in the design: the movement method for plants. When a plant moves in any way, it does so by changing the turgor pressure within parts of its body. Turgor refers to internal water content. The trouble is that this is a rather limited mechanism for any sort of motion. It can be quick for a small plant, like a sundew. It could also move these massive tentacle stems, but due to their huge size and weight, it would be extremely slow. Unless we are talking about something that is already dead, it wouldn't be able to catch anything. The evolution of muscles for a plant is borderline impossible, let alone without any evolutionary steps in between. Even though resetting traps is an observable feature for such plants, it would do nothing but slowly coil and uncoil its tendrils with nothing caught. Therefore, we have to move on to the much more disturbing option, which fits a lot better. An animal that is a cephalopod. Something not unlike a terrestrial member of the Archaeotaudidae family, or giant squids. In this alternative reality, we will have the ancestors of these animals try their luck on land. Sounds like an odd idea, right? Something very unlikely. Well, it is unprecedented, but it's certainly within the realms of possibility. In The Future is Wild, a speculative project imagining life on Earth after humans are gone, scientists theorize pterosquids to take over land, which is by then abandoned by vertebrates. Now, obviously this is just an odd idea. However, there is sound reasoning behind how these animals might make the transition. Reasoning I'm going to use at least partially. We need to go way back, possibly to the Silurian to justify all this. Here I go altering natural history again. However, this is the prime period for an early cephalopod to venture onto land, as competition is still quite timid. As for what species or order, that is practically meaningless for us, as there are hundreds of millions of years to go in terms of evolution. What we should discuss though are the specific adaptations required for our abhorrent abomination of a creature to live on land and partake in the entanglement of unsuspecting explorers. I should cover the external features first, so I have an image to show you in the meantime. So, life on land requires a bit more structural integrity than water. The shell its ancestors had could have very well transformed into an internal structure similar to a cuttle bone, only more ribcage-like. Under the body there are pads, modified tentacles that facilitate land movement, not unlike the feet of snails. However, in the case of the Ya-Te-Veo, these also double as digging implements. We'll get back to the reasoning in a bit. The remaining tentacles, let's say 8, as that would be enough to be mistaken for the thing on this image, also serve a dual function. While the pads aid in locomotion, the tendrils themselves have to pull a significant part of the creature's weight. Hence, they should be rather muscular. Taking another page out of the book of the fictional pterosquids, the horizontal muscles of these arms are surrounded by a circular set. This grants a stronger structure without bones, as well as the strength necessary for the other function, which is catching prey. The barbs, so prominently featured in descriptions, are what took the place of suction cups. Even on the arms of actual squids living today, hidden within said suction cups are hooks that help in grabbing stuff. With the water removed from the equation, the suckers are not that useful, but the hooks are all the more necessary. The eyes are also going to stay, as they provide confirmation for when to strike. Since each peeper is on either side of the Ya-Te-Veo, it is no surprise that witnesses mistook it for some cyclopean horror, instead of a regular two-eyed horror. The outer layer of the animal also has to develop into something more akin to mammalian skin, keeping the moisture in and providing protection. Let's not forget the lungs either. Terrestrial life at this size is not possible without an efficient respiratory system. The openings that take in the air should be relatively close to the head. Having it among the tentacles is not a smart choice, as it would restrict these nose substitutes. Near the neck is sufficient, as it has to stay above ground. Yes, above ground. As I've mentioned, the pet feet double as digging implements. Such a cumbersome, slow-moving predator is unlikely to catch a leaping gazelle or swift hare, unless it uses ambush tactics. Having originated from ectothermic, or in other words, cold-blooded ancestors, it is well equipped to spend long stretches of time relatively motionless with a minimal use of calories due to their slow metabolism. For proper concealment, the Ya-Te-Veo burrows a large chunk of its body when it wants to feed. It spreads its tentacles far and wide, hiding them in the grass or litter. We already know what happens if an animal decides to come close enough. The nearest tendril grabs it with the added help of the hooks. Then the rest reaffirm the grip. As a next step, the Ya-Te-Veo takes a bite. Now, similarly to the experimental plant version, it shouldn't be a vampire. This big boy needs more sustenance. Consistently mistaken for a tree, it has to be close to at least the size of a bush. However, there is a possible explanation. The affair would be admittedly bloody, as the tearing hooks would create a few holes in the prey. With all that blood, no wonder explorers and locals had the wrong impression. Additionally, there is indeed an implement that tears into the body, but it is not a group of spikes meant to suck blood. No, the thing mistaken for those spikes are the two halves of its beak, another feature resulting from its cephalopod nature. Although there is still one more weapon, one we should omit, the venom. It makes no sense for a practically immobile creature to kill its prey with delayed effect. It would have real trouble pursuing an asthmatic sloth, let alone a frightened deer. Alright, that's an exaggeration, it wouldn't be that slow, but still not the chasing type. The legend could simply be attributed to the infection of the lacerations caused by the hooks. Something bound to happen in those exotic environments. The origin of the hissing may stay the same. The tentacles should have a rather thick skin, which protects them from their own hooks, producing the eerie sound instead when dragged across each other. We are almost done, but the vast range the creature was reported from requires attention. Now we are talking about animals that significantly differ from other cephalopods, so much so that I would hazard to put them in a class of their own, since they diverged from their common ancestors pretty far back and were likely among the first animals to try their luck on land. It is fair to assume that finding their niche in that environment, they became pretty widespread. With the advent of vertebrates though, they were outcompeted at numerous habitats, only surviving in select locales. As time passed and tectonic plates shifted more and more, these populations found themselves completely isolated from each other, huge distances apart. Hence, these organisms can be found on different continents, but they are not the same species or genus, even family. They continue to evolve in their own way, adapting to the specific habitat they found themselves in. Therefore, the Ya-Te-Veo is not a single creature, but a varied class. There you have it. That's the realistic man-eating tree for you. I think it is significantly more terrifying than the original. A job well done, I'd say. Alright, I've talked your ear off for long enough. I'll let the next person take it from here. What the hell are you doing here? I told you not to watch it like this. I'm really disappointed in you. Alright, look. I have a soft spot for you, so I'll give you one more chance to watch it the way it was intended to be viewed. Go to the link in the description or the pinned comment, and we'll forget this ever happened. Now go. Don't fail me again.